Welcome into the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, your Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me today, Fox 40, Sean Cunningham. Sean, how are you?
Doing quite well. I'm actually very, very happy that the Kings are out on the road. It kind of gives a few days to, kind of just
Catch our breath.
exhale. Yeah, it's been quite a few weeks of chaos, and even in my personal life, having to say goodbye to a car I've had for 15 years and go car shopping. And if anyone's had to do that, that's not fun. Um, so it's just a lot going on, but I'm finally able to exhale a little bit while my gardeners are out here in front of the house with the leaf blowers going. So hopefully that doesn't distract too much. I'm
All
doing all right.
right. So Sean is okay. We'll get into his car search here in just a sec. But also joining us today, of course, is Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
Hello, hello. I am doing well. Continuing to wear random different baseball hats to confuse our YouTube commenters. I need help here. I have a fresh lavender breeze.
Well, you definitely need help.
Candle.
We know this.
Yeah, I know.
Fresh
lavender breeze candle, or we have an evening fireside glow.
Oh, geez, that's a little
that's
saucy.
good.
I told you that I go
saucy.
clearance candles, guys. These are very obviously clearance candles here.
I think clearance candles are the best candles. I thought you were going to need help with your baseball hat selection because if you're going to wear an A's hat, you can't wear a Seattle Mariners hat. Even Doug Christie would tell you
Doug
that.
Christie would love that. He loves the Mariners.
He does love the Mariners. Yeah, ridiculous, Brenden. Ridiculous.
I'm really struggling in my candle game because all my stuff is still boxed up. So I need to rectify that.
So, Sean, are you still carless? Did you get a new car?
The sigh.
At present time, I have two cars because one is still in my possession that has to basically go to pasture, or the junkyard, or maybe even a car donation. I'm trying to figure that out a little bit.
Cars for Friends, that thing. Yeah,
it's the Cars for Kids,
kids.
Theme song. Yeah, everyone knows that theme song. Yeah, so I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, I did come away with I've stepped into the new modern age, going from an 07 to a 2025. That's a culture shock. And I went with an EV, but that's also a culture shock. I went from a regular gas hybrid to now an EV. So I feel like I'm doing my part for the environment.
You sound so damn excited about this, Sean.
I'm not. Here's the thing. Everyone, when they get a new car, they're just like jumping through the roof. And, I'm so appreciative of the people. I don't want to like put them on, put their names out there. I'm appreciative to the people who assisted me in the process and getting the new car. So those, those people were fantastic. And we have some that are fans of our podcast, believe it or not. So, but I didn't enjoy the process because, like it or not, and going from not having a car payment for the past 15 years to, hey, here's your new car payment. And that part just kind of sucks. So
being a grown up,
Sean, a little bit more responsible now.
Being a grown up is hard.
Yeah, it is. I don't adult very well.
That's right. You should have just brought him in as a sponsor into the podcast, and we would have sat here and given you a discount.
How disingenuous would that be? Like, hey guys, like these are salespeople, these are financiers and all those kind of and underwriters, and they don't represent their dealership from that standpoint. But
I get you.
Hey, we're available, aren't we?
Yeah, we are available. We are, of course, brought to you by Underdog. Underdog Fantasy. And look, we might as well just do it now. I want to tell you about the easiest way to get some action on basketball. It's Underdog and their pick'em game. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite players, stats. And you win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy to use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 8 players to fill out your pick'em entry. Get every pick right, and you take home cold hard cash. I dig it. We also right now we have a promo. If you use the promo code KingsBeat, all one word, you can claim your first free pick, and then also a first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. There it is. Like I fumbled through that. But yeah, I have been playing Underdog, And
Can I
underdogs
be honest? I think
yeah,
the fumbling through is part of the charm. I
it
mean,
is.
where else will you get promotion like that?
I don't know.
I mean, this is great. This is great.
For the record, I'm laughing because Sean's laughing.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're laughing because it's funny.
It could be worse. I could do other things that Sacramento media has done lately that would get
Like
you
what?
to laugh at something.
Mhm.
I don't know,
Oh.
Sean.
Oh,
I don't know.
now Rihanna.
Some funny, tough times.
It is
I'm
some
just
funny
mad
sometimes.
Rihanna knows the local media member a lot better than she knows me right now. That
Oh, poor
breaks the
Sean.
heart. Just breaks the heart.
Just breaks the heart. Okay, so I'm going to show the good folks here. There's something cool about Underdog that I think is super awesome. So let's just look at something like Rudy
Huh.
Gobert.
Rudy
Can you guys
Gobert.
see this?
I can see that.
You can see the gobstopper, right? I'm the only one who calls him the gobstopper, the everlasting gobstopper. I don't know why no one else. I don't know why that name never picked up. But look, you have higher and lower. Super simple, right? But Underdog actually gives you an option to click on something like Rudy Gobert's rebound numbers, and you can go up all the way up to like 17.5 rebounds. And
Sounds a
then
little high.
if we choose something like that, your odds go up. So your payout goes up. The payout goes up to 8.75. So you can adjust each stat like that, which I think is really cool and something that's unique to Underdog from what I've seen. So again, go check it out. Download the app. If you already do online gaming like this, um, just go on there and use the code KingsBeat, and they'll match a certain amount of money. And so at least you get some of your promo cash up front, and that gives you some free play down the road. So it's again, I'm having a good time with it, just like I did with the previous one that we used. And actually, I like this way better. So
I
cool.
think this is consecutive podcasts where we've shown our phones.
Oh,
So
well, yeah,
that streak continues.
This is true.
You did yell at the screen something like, "If you don't like what I'm saying, call me," with
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that, Sean. Something like that.
I've had a lot of people
Did
call me, but not for those reasons.
not for those reasons?
Not
Yeah.
for those reasons.
Okay, let's just dive into this. We got a bunch of stuff to cover today. The Sacramento Kings are on a 5-game win streak. Doug Christie looks like some sort of basketball guru that has brought good luck to the Sacramento Kings as they somehow have cleaved their way through a difficult stretch in the schedule and climbed right back in the Western Conference playoff race. As we record this podcast, the Kings are actually tied with the San Antonio Spurs for the number 10 seed in the Western Conference, which would earn you a play-in bid. But they're like a half game out of 9. They're a game out of 8. I think they're 3.5 games out of 4th. So this thing isn't over, even though we thought there for a little bit that it might be over. Let's just get you guys' general vibes. We'll start with Brenden. Your general vibes about what we've seen over the last week as the everything seems to have changed in the building, with it being the same exact players and the same exact play style and a bunch of missed threes just like they were before, but wins instead of losses.
Yeah, I think there's a different energy with the group, as cliche and basic as that may sound. I think a firing obviously can sometimes, send a jolt through a locker room a little bit. And I think that Doug Christie's done a great job maintaining the togetherness with the group amid all of that. And I honestly always thought that they were better than what their record was, specifically, obviously, when they're going through that 6-game skid. And I think you're starting to see it even out a little bit more because this is a talented team. But I would say that the fight has been there more than anything. A lot of these wins, there's 3 clutch wins, you would say, in here. Against Philadelphia, they have a 15-0 run to close that game. Against Memphis, they play well down the stretch. They just won a double overtime game against the Miami Heat. They go to Golden State and have their first front-to-back win of the season where they did not trail for a single minute of that game. So I think the fashion in which they're doing it is encouraging. There doesn't look to be some sort of like folding going on with this group ever since the firing. They seem to remain confident in their talent that they have on this team, because I don't think any of us ever denied that this was a talented roster. It's more about maybe a little bit of an imbalance that I think still needs to be addressed as time goes on. But it's encouraging what we've seen so far, because I think you can see a firing go in the other direction with a group, and to see them sort of rally around it, and Doug specifically, definitely is an encouraging sign for the team. But for the most part, as knowing as the caveat is, they played some beat up teams throughout this stretch. I think this was a kinder moment of their schedule that I'm not 100% sure doesn't happen under Mike Brown, for example. Mention those clutch performances, but I don't know how much of it I necessarily credit to Doug Christie specifically, but I do think that he's done a good job maintaining the togetherness of this group while they've gone on this run.
Yeah, Sean, you and I both have known Doug for many years, and like we have relationships with Doug. Um, just where do you see the way that he's approached things? And I think we all know, like he's a little different, like when it comes to his ideas on basketball, but his ideas on life. He's a little different, you know. And I mean, I think it has captured the imagination of the players a little bit, and I do think it at least does play into why they have sort of bounced back here.
Yeah, I think what Brenden said was pretty spot on. No matter how it gets done, it just feels like pride took over for this group, and Doug is always 100% authentic to himself. So while messaging, scheme, rotations, all that kind of stuff might have remained the same, sprinkle in the addition of Devin Carter, um, the messaging is different because it's coming from somebody else, and that somebody else has absolute love, respect, admiration, appreciation for what they do as a former player. And corny as it sounds, it's working. Like it's absolutely working right now, and those players have bought in. And sometimes it can come from anywhere, and I think that's the challenge for Doug, is to keep this roster inspired. And I know a lot, right, wrong, or indifferent, objectively is being made of their opposition, and rightfully so. I mean, journalistically, you're playing teams that are without some of their best pieces. Now, you can't help that, and sometimes it takes a slump buster to turn your season around. And like it or not, this is the slump buster, and you'll take it, because look how quick things change. A week ago, things were looking dire, and a week later, here you are on a 5-game win streak. That hasn't happened in many seasons. What, 2021 was it? 23 maybe? I'm trying to remember when the last 5-game win streak was, but I think it was something like that.
Oh,
Anyway,
the 22-23 season.
Is that what it was? Okay.
I think they
yeah,
had I think they had a 6 that year, right? Something
I think
like
you're
that.
right. Yeah. But just however it's happening organically, and whatever it takes, sometimes it doesn't take beating guys over the head with it. Sometimes you just literally go, oh man, we just lost our coach. We just lost our head coach. This organization is serious about, making changes and righting the ship. And, whether you agreed with the firing of Mike Brown or not, they're paying a lot of money to support this new chapter in their story. And I think they've responded well, and this will be, I think, the ultimate test, is going out on this road for a 3-game trip. Celtics, Bulls, and the Bucks. You got the defending champions. You've got a team that's kind of scuffling and looking to probably offload a lot of pieces themselves, and then you've got the Bucks, who are ironically kind of like the Kings in a way, who started off really, really bad to the season and have turned themselves around. And then by the way, you come back and you're going to be hosting the Rockets 1 week from tonight, as we record this podcast, on national TV. And I had said that was the biggest win of your season, and I think that might have been usurped by the back-to-back Warriors and then the double overtime win the other night, which was fantastic over Miami. So I think when they look back at the season's end, whether they turn this thing around or if it kind of goes back and forth, and maybe they have the characteristics of a 500 team or even slightly under, I think they're going to look back at this stretch and say this was a very, very, not only just a key stretch in the season, but really kind of a key stretch in what lies ahead. Not to get too corny, like, I think as they go in the offseason, a lot will be made of just this stretch of basketball and some decisions that are made, and ultimately belief in some players or not. And I don't know. I think it's kind of a crucial moment for this organization right now.
For what it's worth, last season started 2-4 and then rallied off 6 straight, actually, early last season.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So let me touch on a couple of things. Number one, Brenden. I agree. This team underachieved. Like this team like fully underachieves the first half of the season, the first 30 games of the season, and so like I get that. And we look at this team the way they're playing right now, and it's like, okay, why didn't you just play this way before? Because it's not like there has been a bunch of changes. It's just a team that didn't play well, and then all of a sudden they're playing well. And actually, it's a team that didn't have that grimy grittiness to them, and all of a sudden they do. And like, okay, so that's one thing. Number two, Sean, you mentioned authentic and love, and these are things that, like, look, like I said it before. Like Sean and I both known Doug for a long time. Like Doug was my podcast partner for 3 years on another version of this exact same podcast.
Did I
Like,
replace him?
um,
Was it me or was it somebody else? I was trying to remind myself this the other day.
No, well, when I was at NBC decided unilaterally to kill the podcast
Right.
because of a ridiculously stupid idea. I'll just say that right now. They were morons when it came to what was happening regarding podcasting. And
You turned moron into 2 words.
well,
Moron.
I mean, just the fact that I was on their podcast task force for all of NBC, like their Blue Ribbon podcast platform, and I brought the podcast to NBC for them to kill my podcast after years because we were in a global pandemic and people
so
weren't
glad I
getting in their
asked.
cars and listening to a podcast as much was just dumb, and I was impacting the overall numbers of podcasts in the Bay Area, and so I was skewing the numbers. So like whatever, like again, bad decisions are made. So Sean, you didn't replace Doug as much as
Huh.
when I left NBC, I started my own podcast again. But then because I had brought the podcast and it was my RSS feed, I was able to go in, take my podcast back from NBC. They were nice enough to give me that and all the episodes. So they
Okay.
should be hiding somewhere in here where if you're listening to this podcast, you can go back if you're listening on audio and find the other 250 podcasts that were the Kings Insider podcast or the Purple Talk podcast or whatever NBC decided to call it from one week to the next, that led into this. But a lot of those were with Doug. So to like get back to the point at hand,
Sorry.
Doug and I are friends. Like, and when it comes to him covering him as a basketball coach, like it is what it is. Like if he does a bad job, we'll have to call it out as a bad job. If he loses a room like Mike Brown did, or like Luke Walton did, or like any of the other coaches have over the last 15 years, then we have to treat it the same way. But at the same time, when we are talking to Doug in press conferences, you'll see a familiarity with Sean, with me, with Deuce. A lot of us know Doug really well because he was in the media world with us. He was, on a radio station that Brenden now works for. He was on a telecast with me doing pre and post game. He was on a telecast doing, the analyst job. Like we've known him for a long time, and so I'm hopeful that he keeps it going because I like Doug and to get back to what Sean said, there is an authenticity to Doug and there is a love for the city of Sacramento and the franchise that Doug brings that you just don't get. Like you're not going to find anywhere else. I don't think there's any, even out of Lottie and Peja and Bobby and Mike Bibby and all the guys that have come through. Doug has always been the one that has this fire inside that says, I have unfinished business here, and that's why I'm here. I'm here because I want to go win a championship that we didn't win as players. And whether it works or not, I don't know. I just know this. Doug has a much better opportunity right now than 3 years ago when Luke Walton was fired and he almost got the job then. And to me, this is a moment where he's become a better coach. He's worked 3 years as an assistant under 3 different head coaches. He's learned a lot. He's coached summer league. He's worked one-on-one with players like Domas over the last 2 seasons and really just like dug into the job and figured it all out. And I actually have a little bit of faith in what he's doing right now. Not just because I think his messaging is fun and cool and different, but I think there is something to believing somebody when they tell you something. And when Doug tells you something, you believe it because he's being honest. And that's something that I think will carry over with the players. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, I think I replaced Doug Christie as your partner. I think
we
true.
developed that.
Yeah. You're next in line.
No,
for
you're
King's
right,
Coat.
and it's that must be that'd be awful.
Ipso facto,
no, but,
Sean is the next head coach.
Yeah,
or me.
Geez.
Like, hey, why not?
Yeah, do that. That way I can sit there and snipe away. And
That's right.
I can't believe he's doing that. No, I look, what you said is right. And I think what's been amusing to me is just the reaction from everyone, national, local fans. I feel like this fan base has been kind of, I'll clean my language up, messed with a little bit this year. They've kind of been through the gauntlet of emotions, and to look, I always talk about how fast things can change, and even I'm surprised by this turnaround. Typically, when there's a head coaching move, that team comes out and wins the next night. That first game. In this case, they didn't, and in fact, I wouldn't even say they played well at all. I thought there was just when that first game against the Lakers in LA looked pretty gnarly, but for whatever reason, they've been able to find it and work it out, make things work to their advantage, and kind of get back to some of the basics that this team is known for. Certainly the pace is up. I think that's undeniably. They're playing fast. You're literally seeing, and Doug is even publicly commented on it, you literally see guys pulling their jersey like, hey, come sub me out. And it was on full display in that double overtime game against Miami. What a thriller that was. Seeing guys play upwards of 50 minutes. Still not the recipe for sustained success, in my opinion, but they were able to do it. That was a throw everything at it kind of scenario. And both of those games without De'Aaron Fox, I don't think that's being talked about enough. And what's interesting is really even going back to when Mike Brown was here, this team showed grit without Fox. And I'm not saying, they're better without De'Aaron Fox. I'm not, but I do like sometimes seeing how teams handle adversity. And they seem to be able to wear that pretty well. It kind of leads to opportunity for others. They were playing a little bit more free, as if, they had a nothing to lose kind of mentality, and they stumble into a win over a bad Warriors team that night, who was on the second night of a back-to-back. Then you've got, the Heat, who were in a double overtime game without, Jimmy Butler, and they've got all kinds of problems going on there. But certainly it gave you a good opportunity to look at some of these teams that, much like the Kings, who've been rumored to be in trade conversations for this season, you've got Miami and the Warriors right up there with them. And I think these last two games were really kind of statement wins and kind of banner moments for their season. It doesn't mean that they've turned things around, but certainly to go from losing 6 straight to all of a sudden winning 5 straight is pretty remarkable. And they've been able to turn their fortune of the season around. And as James outlined, you're right there. 3 games from 6? That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and that was one of the main things that you kind of needed to do, obviously, is regain ground after that slow start. I think this road trip will tell us a lot. Obviously you get the defending champions on the road in Boston, where it seems like the Kings always kind of get their butts kicked. Last year actually was a 1-point game, if you guys remember. I looked this up the other day. It was the Colby Jones tip in where he got hit in the face and they didn't call it, but the Kings only came back because benches were totally emptied, and then the bench managed to kind of bring that one back before starters came back in. But I think we'll learn a lot there. Chicago plays okay here and there. They're kind of game to game, I guess. And then Milwaukee you got there too, and the Houston I think you could throw in there as well. So I think we'll find out a lot during this stretch, but there's moments where the offense has been rolling. Like you go to against Memphis, 138 in regulation, 129 in regulation against the Warriors. And I think they're forcing more turnovers. The pace has been up a little bit, which I think makes for interesting moments for DeMar DeRozan, like in that second, the double overtime where he scores what ended up being 8 straight, I believe, because they took back, they changed a 3 to a 2. The pace kind of slowed down there, and I think it was a little bit more optimal for him. But Malik's been playing well in that high pace. Domas as well. I think the big change really on the court that you've seen from Doug Christie is more Keon Ellis minutes. And sure, that lines up with De'Aaron Fox not playing, but I think there's moments where we saw that earlier this year, and Mike Brown maybe still didn't lean into Keon this extent that we've seen Doug do so far. Keon had played 30 plus minutes on 2 occasions in the games under Mike Brown. He's already done it in 3 out of the 6 games under Doug Christie. And again, Fox out, double overtime game. Obviously, you're going to pass that mark, but I think he's been great, and he's probably been one of the biggest differences I've noticed under Doug are probably the Keon minutes and practicing less, I would say.
Okay, so I'm going to counter the Keon minutes thing, because I mean, clearly he's played more minutes, but he's played more minutes not just because De'Aaron missed 2 games, but before that, Keegan missed 2. And so he's been a starter for 4 games, and
Right.
not to, it's almost like by accident that Keon has been forced to play 30 something minutes over the last 4 or 5 games. And I don't know how Doug's going to deal with that when everybody's healthy. Just so people know, De'Aaron Fox is listed as questionable for Friday against Boston with a right glute contusion from just an absolutely dirty play by Jaren Jackson Jr. late in the Memphis game. Sean knows I just think that Jaren Jackson Jr. as a player is just sloppy. I do. I just think he, like everything he does, like he travels at least like 14 times a game. And like he's the worst rebounding big man I think I've ever seen outside of maybe Brooke Lopez. Like him and Brooke Lopez have like a battle for who is the worst rebounder, but it doesn't make any sense with Jaren Jackson.
I showed James a Jaren Jackson stat the other night during the Heat game, and I got in like the defensive position because I thought James was going to swing on me for showing it to him. But Jaren Jackson had 13 boards in that game.
Yeah. The sun shines on a dog's ass at least part of the day. Is that what it is? A broken watch is right twice a day, Sean. I mean, like, look, I just think first of all that was a dirty play, and I don't like that because you put somebody at risk, and De'Aaron Fox easily could have broke a wrist or landed on his shoulder and done damage, which is what I thought he initially had done. So I'm just not a fan of, especially late in the game when you're getting busted up and someone goes in the key and you just like chip him while he's in the air. I just, again,
I think Jackson's, I didn't see any comments, and to be honest, there was no locker room access that night because everyone had kind of bailed after the double over, or I forget if that was the beam night or what, but
it might have been the beam night.
Yeah, when they went up to the roof, but it looked as if Jaren Jackson was crying over or complaining over the use of the hand when Fox goes up and hits him in the face. And
that was secondary. He was
also
making an excuse.
No, and I'm not trying to stick up for it. But I think that's what at least he was trying to communicate when he got up, and the likes of DeRozan and Sabonis were kind of chirping back at him, which was kind of.
I think he was pissed at the play before where Fox put his hand on top of Scottie Pippen Jr.'s head and wouldn't let him get off the ground. And again, I thought that was BS wild. Flagrant. It wasn't a flagrant though. There was no intent to do harm. There was no like visual hit. You put your hand on top of someone's head and you held them down. What was that?
There was no wind up, but I don't know. It was kind
when you make contact you make contact with the head, and I know this goes back to the Sabonis thing, which doesn't get enough attention on it. I get it, but it's usually ends up being a flagrant.
This was to me. It felt retaliatory in the same way that Jonas Valanciunas, when they were playing Memphis, Chimezie Metu had dunked, and then the next time he went to dunk, Jonas just decided to walk underneath him and drag him off the rim and then drop him on the ground. So it's interesting. Both times it was Memphis. Either way, if we go through and we look at all the games, it's a 5-game winning streak, and I'll tell you, whether they're missing players or not, all 5 of those teams are likely playoff teams or close to it. The one team that's probably not is the Golden State Warriors, who have not played well lately, but still are above the Kings and in the top 10 in the Western Conference. Philadelphia is 15 and 20 or whatever it is, but I don't think any of us think that they won't be a playoff team by the end. Dallas, again, whether they're missing players or not, You got Dallas, you got Memphis. Memphis 3rd seed, and the last time they played the Kings, Ja Morant got thrown out late in the game and was totally ineffective, and Memphis still beat the Kings. So there are some things I would point to where it's like, okay, this team is playing better, like overall, and even Miami. Miami's a playoff team. They're going through a whole bunch of chaos and weirdness with the Jimmy Butler situation, which, that's what you get for getting into bed with Jimmy Butler. Like every team that has ever had Jimmy Butler feels the same exact way on the way out the door. Like that dude burns it down, and it's like, all right, great. Here's some things though.
Does that mean if I made you Monty McNair, you're staying away from Jimmy Butler?
Oh, I wouldn't touch Jimmy Butler. Oh, are you kidding me? No way.
Yeah. Are they better with Jimmy than DeMar? That's what he asked me this the other day.
No way. I mean, Jimmy Butler, he's a great defender. So. No, he's a great defender, but at age 35, like how much of a great defender is he anymore?
He's a here's the main difference. Like on court, be damned. Like in the locker room, and Jimmy can be jovial and but he's a dominating personality in the locker room. He and DeMar DeRozan just isn't,
Yeah.
And I think the impact within the kind of structure within this roster is better suited with DeMar DeRozan.
And I think it works for a short amount of time with Jimmy Butler. It's fun. It's like, oh, this is crazy. Oh, is he really dating Shakira, or is that just like a joke out there on the internet? Like you're always like, oh, this is weird. This is crazy. Look at his hair. And then you get like 2 years in and go, oh, dear Lord, what are we doing? Like, so I want to get into a couple of things though, because I think the rotations are similar. Keon Ellis has played more. Devin Carter has played, which is, like that's new. And I like, to be honest with you, to start with Devin Carter, like there are some things I like about him and some other things that I don't like about him so far.
What's that?
He's got to adjust to the NBA game. And like, I think some of the defensive stuff so far has not been like all that smooth, but as a rebounder, holy cow, he's incredible. Like he's averaging per 36, like 13 and a half rebounds per game, which is absolutely bizarre to watch a guard who just flies out of nowhere. He's always under the rim. He's always in position to go get a rebound. It's really, really remarkable.
He doesn't stop moving. He doesn't stop moving. Like he's always moving.
That's one thing, but like Sean will get this. Brenden will have no idea who I'm talking about.
Oh,
he takes as long to get rid of a 3-point shot as Tyus Edney did. And to me, it's like, oh man, that ain't gonna fly at the NBA. As soon as they adjust to him, as soon as he plays more minutes and he's part of any scouting report, he's not gonna be able to get that shot off at all. And then it's a moon ball. And it reminds me of what they did with Davion Mitchell a couple of years ago, where all of us were like, oh my gosh, what in the world is happening? So I'm concerned about that stuff. I'm a person who believes that you work within the confines of a player's shot to fix it, that you don't reinvent somebody's shot, but somebody has to get in there and work with that shot, because I don't think that at the NBA level, like it takes too long and it's way too high. But those are outside of that. I like, again, the rebounding to me is just stunning. Brenden, you look like you had something for us there.
Well, I'm trying to find a Tyus Edney jump shot video and not succeeding. I just watched him hit a game winner against Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fast
And
break,
end
to end, and he did that twice in that same
95
run.
tournament. Not finding any jump shot videos.
I don't totally agree with that, James. I mean, it's a funky jumper. I mean, make no mistake, it is funky. But we knew that coming in, and we were talking about it coming in, and he always had it goes in, and we saw it with Tyrese Halliburton, that little sidestep, and with his three, which is also kind of funky. We'll have to see how teams adjust to it. I definitely look at it. It's the type of, you guys have been around me long enough, especially when we're watching basketball games, that if something odd happens and I immediately just go, oh, like I react to it audibly when I am surprised by something. And it's one of those kind of jumpers that the first time you see it, you just go, oh, that's different. It's not quite Will Purdue shooting a free throw, but it's different.
It's okay. So you mentioned Halliburton. We also had Kevin Martin here in Sacramento, who has a really, really weird release. It's not that for me. Like the release, that's fine as long as it
Mhm.
goes in. I don't care what the release looks like. It just takes way too long. Like that's like watching. Like in all honesty, it's like watching 7-footers shoot three. Like your centers, your backup center shooting three in warmups or in when they're all on the practice court, and you're like, man, Costa Kufis can hit like 8 out of 10 from three. But you also know that he's got his feet set and he's standing there waiting for the ball for 5 seconds, and then he gets the ball, and, like, just the process of getting the shot up, it doesn't matter if it goes in. There's no way at the NBA level you're not gonna get blocked. And again, if he's playing major minutes, the more you see that shot as an opponent, the tighter you're gonna get on him and the less he's gonna be able to even try to pull up for the shot. So
Yeah, I feel like we've seen some moments, specifically probably in Stockton, where he's kind of coming off screens and shooting off movement and still quick in that aspect. I honestly haven't noticed much of the catch and shoot it taking some time, so I'll kind of watch for it. But asked him a little bit about why the jumper is the way that it is, and he just said when he was younger, he wasn't quite strong enough to necessarily shoot from above his head, so that's why it's got a little bit of a lower release point and crazy high arc on his shot too. I'm sure, Sean, you feel it with your camera if you're trying to track the ball at all. It's like, holy crap! Every once in a while, the thing goes out of my frame, and so that was developed as his dad taught it to him. If you have a higher arc, the rim is bigger from a higher trajectory. Same thing Steph Curry kind of has talked about with some of his jumper. So makes a little bit of sense there. And as long as it goes in, I think it's fine. I'll watch for it being a little bit quicker. But 37.7% from three last year on is at Providence, obviously on just a little under 7 a game. The years before that don't look great, and it's kind of interesting how right after he deals with a shoulder surgery, the same thing that he just dealt with now, but previously in his shooting arm, his dominant arm, the right side. Then he goes on to shoot really well. I think that's kind of an interesting timeline there. And but hey, if it goes in, then that's really what matters here. But you definitely feel the rebounding with his 6'8", 6'9" wingspan. He's got a 42-inch vertical, which ties Malik Monk's, just to put that in perspective. So interesting stuff there. And we're 3-4 games in with him. So I think the defense will come around. Getting put on Steph Curry in your second game isn't the easiest task. And I thought he did all right.
yeah, and I'm not trying to be hypercritical because I keep saying, like, we can't expect that much out of him because it's been 9 months since he played basketball. So I'm not sitting here trying to tear apart Devin Carter's game. I actually think he's been really good for the minutes that he's got so far. And there are moments where you're like, okay, you're hurting a little bit. You're not understanding the game or the game's going too fast for you. But that's to be expected. I just think like there are things he's going to have to work through as a ball player to take like a to become more of a full-time rotational 20 to 25 minute per game player. And that's just my opinion. Maybe he just proves us wrong the entire time or proves me wrong the entire time. But certainly he goes out there and rebounds like crazy, which brings us to the one stat. One of the stats. I think the Kings are playing harder under Doug Christie. Like they're getting to more 50-50 balls. They're fighting for rebounds more, and that's something that has stood out. And like through the first 6 games under Doug, they're averaging 47 rebounds a game. Before under Mike Brown, they're at 43.6. But I'm going to point this out: they were at 43.6 in the first 31 games, but they're allowing 43.1 rebounds, so only a plus 0.5 on the rebound number. Over the last 6 games, it's 47 rebounds for the Kings and 40.3 for their opponents. They're plus 7 rebound per game over their opponents for 6.7. So that shows me that number one, like Devin is part of that. He's been a really good rebounder for his first 4 games, whatever he's played. But I think also just a team as a whole, the rebounding numbers that we've seen from Keegan Murray all of a sudden skyrocketing again. Actually, him going and getting rebounds in that win over Miami were stunning. Like it showed me that his ankle's a lot closer to 100% than I thought it was. And so I think just overall they're trying hard on that end. I'd also like their offensive numbers are ridiculous since Doug took over. Their averaging offensive rating is a 122.5 versus a 114.7. So they're up almost 8, like, what is that, per 100 possessions, 8 points per 100 possessions. And their defensive number has crawled up a little bit, but it's gone from 113.6 under Mike to 114.8. And if you can give me a +8 and a -2, 1.2 on the defensive end, I'll take that anytime, because that net rating of like +6.8 under Doug versus where it was with Mike is pretty substantial.
Yeah, I would say the other couple things that stood out to me is like it helps when you shoot 40% from three in back-to-back games, but Memphis and Golden State, but overall they're not shooting crazy well under Doug for the most part. It's not like just a streak of ridiculous three-point shooting. The offensive rebounding you pointed out is up. The steals are up, which I think also does speak to the effort and kind of mucking up the game a little bit. I feel like they're picking up full court a little bit more often, which obviously fits Doug Christie's personality and his style of play from when he was out there. And assists are up too. I think that the ball movement is up there so far. Ball and player movement, specifically getting that pace, like I kind of mentioned earlier, but also in the half court, I think has come back a little bit. I mean, it's all the staples that we already heard for this team are just kind of re-emerging during this stretch.
Yeah, and Brenden, you brought up the 3-point shooting. So over the last 6 games, they're shooting 35.9% from 3, which still isn't good. But that's compared to 34.2 before. So they're up 1.7%. But the thing I would point to is that we talked about this so many times, that they were giving up 15 makes per game, and they're only hitting 12, right? So, or they're only hitting 11. And so they were up against like a -12 in 3-point shooting every single night, which is almost impossible to recover from. I mean, if you're giving up 12 more points just from behind the arc right now, through the last 6 games, they're averaging 13.8 makes from 3, and they're giving up 13.5 makes from 3. So not only have they closed the gap, but they flipped the script where they're actually getting more 3-point makes per game than their opponent. And so there isn't this giant swath of points that you have to try to make up, whether it's at the free throw line or whether it's from getting more possessions and getting more buckets. However it is that you're going to get those shots, you don't have to, because they found a way to close that gap. And part of it is because they had a couple of big time games. They had 22 in a game, right? 22 in a game and 19 in a game, I believe. And that's led to the other point that you made, Brenden. They're up from 25.5 assists per game to 30. So over the last 6 games, they're up 4.5 assists per game, which is good. I mean, it's something that if you're hitting shots at a little bit higher clip, that number is going to go up. But I also think overall they're sharing the ball better. It looks that way. It feels that way. And they're playing with a little bit, like, I know Doug has had some like spectacular one-liners for us, but like his goal is to to play with joy, but also to take away the opponent's joy. And I think that it's an interesting line.
Yeah, mucking up the game is what it typically is, and they have shown an act to get under the skin of their opponents. And the Warriors game one comes to mind certainly, and you mentioned the Memphis one with a couple of moments there, but that's almost necessary. It's almost like fake tough guy syndrome, because you're not the most physical team, but when you can disrupt what other teams are trying to do, especially when they want to come in and bully you. We saw that with the Lakers, the bully ball mentality that they had, and how Sacramento just kind of wilted in those situations. If you can become the team that is out there that's kind of being disruptive and annoying, then that can definitely work to the favor of a team that doesn't have the most physicality. And so I'm here for it. I absolutely think that's what they should be doing. And had thought even weeks ago when we had talked about the notion of maybe just embracing the fact that all these teams that are so much bigger and stronger and more athletic that come in here, and that's the recipe for disaster, then you go into what's good for you and you just totally steer in to being a small ball lineup and being disruptive and just being a pest. This is kind of that way without totally going small. So we've certainly seen them go small at times. We've seen zones at times, but I feel like if they can remain annoying, That should be that should almost be something that's on that whiteboard in the home locker room where Doug is changing messages every single game. And if they could be annoying, I think that's one of their staples that could find them some success.
Brenden, what's your your favorite line from him so far?
I think just the fact that he dropped a Bob Marley and Deepak Chopra quote, both within a week
Days
of having the
days
job.
of each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably my favorite. Yesterday he was messing around with Deuce a lot at the practice, and I thought that was pretty funny. I don't have a one-liner that comes to the top of my mind. You tweeted one, James. Was it after last game? Shoot, I'm gonna have to find it again. I'll get back to you here.
I don't know if it's necessarily a one-liner. I mean, it's definitely not, but I had always known that he is a smelling salts guy, and I know that clip had circulated quite well after one of the games, and I was like, I'm gonna have him defend it because I think there's people that if you've never experienced smelling salts, first of all, be careful because it's not for everyone and you can hurt yourself. But I love the fact that he does it and he has an explanation for it. And yeah, I was like, I just literally said, you're a smelling salts guy. What's that do for you? And as if I didn't know, I just want him to ask. He's like, well, I've always been it. And, and no one ever, the camera didn't see me because I wasn't the head coach. And he's absolutely right about that. But I'm glad that he got to explain that because that was kind of everywhere over the past 72 hours of doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things about Doug. Like he doesn't eat pork and he doesn't eat beef. He also takes 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar every day. And a lot of times he'll mix it with honey and cayenne pepper and like hot water and drink it. But he has some interesting like rituals and things that he does. Like he's quirky. He is very quirky as a human, and I've always enjoyed hanging out with him. He's very fun. He's very authentic, like we've said.
Absolutely. Definitely a different type of person. I mean, you look at his marriage, it's been in the public eye for so long. I mean, he gets married every year still.
Every year they get remarried.
Every single year they get remarried. So, yeah, just different. But I will say this, going back to when he was a player, and look, Doug Christie was a punchline across the NBA because of him and the relationship with Jackie and the wife and all the the gestures that they would do while he was playing. And so a lot of people who just didn't understand it, or they would constantly kind of poke fun of it, and hey, I get it, like it's an easy target. But in the locker room, I mean, they love the guy. I mean, I remember talking to Chris Webber about it, not to name drop, but like he looks at Doug Christie as a absolute like mentor. Like even though they're similar teammates and all that stuff, he looks at him for a guy who wasn't married at the time, and Chris Webber looking at Doug and says, no, that's admirable. He's like, I hope to have that one day. He's like, to see how in love these two people are. And he says everyone looks at it as kind of, it doesn't make sense, or it doesn't go by traditional norms of what marriage and a relationship and family look like, and they do it differently. And he always looked at it in awe and in admiration of it. And I always thought that was really quite special. And here they are still today. And I'd argued over the past few years, like, shoot, back when he was a player, he was the star of the show. And that hasn't been the case over the past decade, him being out of the limelight and her being absolutely in the limelight as a reality TV star. I mean, she's a bigger star than he is. And now here he is stepping back as like a key face, being the face of an organization, leading this new team as an interim head coach, puts another kind of light on him again.
I'll say on the quirkiness that Mike Brown also very much fit that.
Absolutely.
I would say.
Yes.
And you could see how any of that could get tiring during a bad spell or as things start to go sour, because Mike definitely had a lot of that as well. That is, appealing at first, and then maybe can get a little bit tiring. Just again, I think depending on results, right? But I think the messaging, the biggest difference I notice in messaging is that Doug clearly has like a deep-rooted love for the city of Sacramento and the Kings organization and what everything the Kings mean to this city. And I think that he's tried to really get that point across, obviously, taking him up to the beam and expressing just how much that means to the city and different aspects from that perspective. And I would say that the fan base also makes it pretty easy to see that it does mean something to this organization. And I think that he's selling that message a little bit more, I feel like, just because he's so engraved in it.
Yeah, and none of this is to say that like Mike isn't authentic or anything like that. If anyone's hearing that message, like it's just got a newness to it. So I think the refreshing nature of having some of these new feelings and messaging and personality around this group at a time where they probably needed it if things had gone stale. This is kind of some of the things that have been brought out of Doug Christie.
Yeah, I kind of like I've compared the Kings a little bit to like Charlie Brown. Right, and how there's, like, a dark cloud that just kinda follows them around and was just raining on them everywhere they went, and the dark cloud isn't anywhere else, it's just pouring down on their head, and Doug, like, popped open a big old golf-size umbrella and just held it over the team and said, "Hey, everybody in tight, I got you," and to me, like, right now, he's got the rain, like he's deflecting the rain, but there has to come a point where he's able to show that he can lead the team to a spot that's not raining. And that's sort of like the job at hand here. He's got 40 something games to prove that he's the answer. And to be honest with you, I hope he does. Like I've always said, like the one reason why I never wanted him to get the job earlier, especially the first time around with Luke, was like, look, I know what that job was. That was a job that no one was gonna win. That was a job that Alvin Gentry walked into it and knew that he was gonna get a pay bump, but he was gonna get a pay bump very temporarily, and then he would be, like, pushed out to the side because no one was gonna turn that thing around, just like poor Tyrone Corbin went 7-21 in his 28 games as head coach, and, like, George Karl, same thing, like, had a really difficult time capturing the imagination of a team, and that's what taking over a team midseason is. So for him to be able to like have this positivity and have it go the right way early on, I'm super excited for it because like look, he deserves an opportunity here. He is a guy that did come back because he has unfinished business. He is a guy that went and did what it is you're supposed to do and become an assistant coach for 3+ years to go coach a summer league team, good to go do the things that he's done to make sure he's ready when the job came around the second time. And I hope that he actually gets an opportunity because, like, look, the last thing I want is for Doug Christie to fall into the same exact, like, sort of spell that guys like Vlade Divac and Peja Stojakovic do, where I don't think we hear boos anymore when they show Vlade up on the screen, but there are certainly enough fans that feel that way, that they feel like they want to boo him. And it's because, he got put in a situation to try to turn the franchise around. He delivered some star players, but he made some mistakes. And now he is a little bit of a pariah in Sacramento. And that's not something that I would hope for Doug specifically, because I do know him personally. And I don't want that to be the way that his legacy in Sacramento is remembered, as somebody who didn't draft Luka Doncic.
I mean, short
just
of
straight
a
up.
championship, like, coaches get fired,
That's
and
right.
it's going to happen to Doug Christie. He's not going to be the final Kings head coach,
Ever.
and it's a matter of when that happens. But yeah, I mean, when you put yourself in a position to be the GM in Vladdy's case or a head coach, whether it goes good or bad, you're always going to have your critics, and you can't worry about that. So, I think even the people who still tend to take swipes at Vladdy, they can separate and rationalize the two different types of figures that were Vlade Divac for this organization. And I think
I
that'll
hope
be
they can.
true with Doug Christie as well.
Okay. Let's get to the business of basketball. I think this is like it's turned around way quicker than any of us thought. Right? I mean, I think again the Kings are right there on the cusp of being back in the conversation. Do you guys feel like they've done enough to? Because I said this
Hold on,
before.
back in the conversation of what?
Of getting into the playoff picture. I mean, they're right in. I mean, they're in the play-in at this point. After San Antonio lost last night. But I said this, I think on the last pod, like this team has a lot of work to do to prove that they deserve the right for for Monty McNair to go out and make a big deal now. Like, you don't start throwing 2027, 2028, 29 first round picks out into the open when your team's bad. When you could be really bad in those years and not have you need those picks. And so I looked at this team when they dropped 6 games under 500 and said, "Hey, look, I'm not making some big trade now. Like, you guys aren't a playoff team." And I know Monty would basically be saying, "Hey, I'm going to just take the loss here and probably get fired this summer because we're not going to make the playoffs and stuff." But at the same time, there has to be, on the player side, a certain amount of responsibility that's taken, and a certain amount of response. And at a 5-game win streak, they're a game under 500 now. They're right back into like a situation that could be positive. Are you guys sort of the opinion that you would start looking hard at trades again? Or are you more of like, okay, I want to see this a little bit closer to the trade deadline?
Can I ask it a different way? Like maybe a different question before you
Okay.
answer that, Brenden? Like, do you have to have a belief in the team that they've turned things around in order to make that trade? Because I feel like even if the team had been, continuing their losing ways, I still think they would have been aggressively searching to add to this team. Like, I don't think that mindset has changed. I still think, meaning that whether they were losing, let's say 10 straight, and they were heading down that path to where they are now, where they've won 5 straight, and they've got a head coaching change that kind of precipitates that. Like, I truly feel like the desire to make this team better in the now is there, short of moving their franchise centerpiece in De'Aaron Fox, which you could
We'll
have
deal with
still
that this summer.
conversations. Yeah, that's things I don't see happening in the season necessarily, if at all. So putting that aside, I still think they want to see what this team looks like with De'Aaron Fox and with additional pieces. I think what my question is, do you feel that they've turned a corner necessarily with a 5-game win streak? Does this give you any added enticement on your end? I'm not asking Monty McNair, he's not here, to make a move, because I truly believe that they have that anyway.
Yeah, I would say that it was already probably there no matter, but I think that does speak to the belief in the talent that was on the roster and maybe just them not executing up to the talent level that they already had in place. I think the tricky part about the situation is obviously De'Aaron Fox's potential future, and however much you want to factor that into all of this, if it's just, a foregone conclusion at this point that you're moving on this offseason, or if you're trying to work to convince him that this is trending upwards and he should stick around. But I think no matter, you kind of already put yourself in a situation where it is largely about right now. I mean, you just signed DeMar DeRozan this offseason, who's obviously an aging star in this league. I think that speaks to what you're trying to do right now. You do have longer term pieces of guys locked up, like Malik will be here a little while, Domas be around for a little while, Keegan, Devin, you can keep going a little bit there. But I think for the most part, like, your roster was already in a spot where you're fairly focused on right now. Not that you don't have potential internal development with Devin Carter, Keegan Murray, but we've seen how that's gone so far this season, albeit obviously things that both of them have gone through. But I just think the roster was already in a spot where you were committing to at least being decent right now. And it's, with everything going on, De'Aaron and all everything else, it feels hard to pivot off of that.
Yeah, but when you were the 11th or 12th seed, like, you weren't decent. I mean, that's like, I mean, that's a tough thing to say, but like, this team is underachieved grotesquely. Like,
yeah, but I think, and I agree with you, but I think that, in terms of the way they looked at the talent as underachieving, I still feel they wanted to add to the current roster rather than sell off parts, if that makes sense.
I think that they got to a point where they were pushing really hard to get trades done. And then all of a sudden you look up and the team is like spiraling out of control. And it's like, okay, do I really want to put this team in a situation where you don't have draft picks moving forward? Because I certainly don't think that, like, if you traded for Cam Johnson 2 weeks ago, the Cam Johnson would have been the reason why anything turned around. He would have just been
Right.
another, $20 million player on a group of players that are underachieving. And sure, could he have made an impact? Maybe, but not the way they were heading. Like they were heading to a dark place, and all of a sudden they're not in that dark place anymore. I think it has changed. Like I would be more willing to commit to this roster and who they are and add to it right now than I would a week and a half ago.
Hmm.
Just because I thought like, oh, this thing's going dark, and it's not only is it Mike Brown out the door, but what happens next? Because I didn't expect a recovery, not like this, and especially like we can talk about how guys didn't play and the schedule doesn't look as hard as it was, but that 6-game stretch that they just went through, that's not like all of them are playoff teams except for maybe Philadelphia right now. But even that in the Eastern Conference is not that far off a playoff team. And we all know that they're probably going to be a playoff team when you get Embiid back fully and everything else. It's just like where they were in the standings at the time. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I would definitely be more willing to invest in what I'm seeing than I was before.
Yeah, I think for me, no, I mean, I think for me, it's about the same, and maybe I think it might show, to your point, James. I think what it might show, not necessarily how aggressive the front office for Sacramento wants to be, but honestly, I think them showing that they've been able to turn things around in the short term with a 5-game win streak, new head coach, kind of a reinvigoration of what they've built and what the expectations internally that they have. I think it shows that the rest of the league that, hey, Sacramento might not be as desperate to make a move as you maybe once thought a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And I think that might speak a little bit loudly. So if you're Brooklyn, for example, or you're Utah, or name Washington, whatever team it is, thinking that, oh, we're going to fleece Sacramento, they're going to act out of desperation. Maybe that mentality changes more so than any internal mentality that you have in terms of how you approach making a move or the trade deadline ahead.
Yeah, I definitely think like the NBA, we see it every day. Like life comes at you fast. And I think there was a point where the Nets thought they held all the cards with the Kings. And then a point where the Kings became like probably not a trade partner again. And then all of a sudden, Cam Johnson rolled his ankle. And so things just kept changing. And that's the league in a nutshell. Like there is no like clear way that this thing is all going to work out. Like even we watched the crazy 360 dunk by Zion Williamson, and it's like, okay, well, like the Pelicans aren't that far out of it. And then if you look at the teams, I mean, but you know what I mean? Like Pelicans fans
Right.
are like, hey, we might have a shot here. Look at him. And
No,
we all know he's going to get
Pelicans
hurt
are
again.
pretty far out of
They're
it.
pretty far out of it.
Yeah.
You think so, but they were like this 2 years ago and won they went 13-1 to get back in it, something like that. And
Yeah.
so,
I mean,
I get it, but okay, so I
Yikes.
want to ask you guys this too, just real quick before we get out of here. If you're looking at the teams above the Kings, and like again, I'm not super scared of San Antonio or Golden State, or now we're looking at Dallas, and Dallas is sitting here with Luka Doncic out for another 2 or 3 weeks, and Kyrie out for another week or two. And you start looking at the Clippers, who I don't think any of us have ever been super scared of. The Lakers, even though they've punked the Kings a couple of times, there could come a stretch of games here where, again, LeBron James and Anthony Davis miss time. You get all the way up even to Denver. I'm not that concerned with Denver. You look at
really,
again, Houston and Memphis that are playing above their weight right now and may come back down to earth a little bit. The only team that I look in the Western Conference as like a superstar, no doubt, going to make it to the Western Conference Finals is the Thunder. Like I don't think I'm being crazy when I look in that. And you could see where of all the teams, again, even throw Minnesota in there. Minnesota's not playing well at all. The Kings are a team that all of a sudden is playing well and has an opportunity to leapfrog some of these teams. Is there anyone out there that's like really scaring you and like making you go, James is crazy, and there's no way that they can get back in a conversation for a 4, 5, 6, which again, they're 3.5 games out of the 4.
Yeah. For me, I don't think that the Kings are that good to be able to do that, barring some increase to their roster, some piece coming in to help them. I hear what you're saying that they're not far from it based off the success they have, but I still think a lot of these teams above them, despite injuries, are really good. I think the team to me to really watch going forward is the Clippers. Them getting Kawhi Leonard back, they were already keeping their, to use your term, punching above their weight. I think the Clippers could be, really interesting. I do like Denver a lot. I've really been impressed with the top four teams. Certainly, there's some holes with Denver and some of these other teams, but the way they've manifested themselves. But I'm with you. The Thunder are clearly head and tails.
Shoulders.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's not even a discussion. I wouldn't put another team in their category in the West, but out East, I think you've got two of those teams, and I do put the Celtics in that category, and they're 5 games behind Cleveland at this point.
I think the top 5 teams in the East are better than anyone that's beneath OKC.
And then you're looking at like someone like Orlando. They're getting Paolo Banchero back. I mean, they were able to kind of still remain competitive and still hold on to that 4. The Bucks have turned their season around. The Pacers are just kind of this weird team who've all of a sudden won 4 straight, though. It's so funny to look at how 1 through 9 in the East, they've all have winning streaks or have won games right now. And it's, I don't know, it's going to be kind of fun. And check out the Feel Good Pistons.
Oh,
what should they be doing?
Those are Kyle's Pistons. He was all in on them early on. We've been calling them Kyle's Pistons all year. They just got back to 500. Yeah. Brenden?
Yeah, I would say that I'm kind of between the two. I mean, OKC clear top of the West, and I think a lot of the teams that Sean highlighted are kind of where I'm at too. I'm still not overlooking Denver. I mean, I think specifically from a Kings perspective, any players that are just like the super cerebral can pick you apart guys, I would worry about with the Kings defense. Obviously, Jokic falls into that. I think James Harden falls into that. I think Doncic falls into that, obviously. So I think some of those teams are interesting. I love the Clippers shout from Sean. They played really good defense this year. When you have Ty Lue, I think that you're kind of always in those cards. And James Harden playing some of his best basketball since the Houston days, it feels like right now. So, nobody to necessarily be overly scared of, which I think also speaks to we're all agreeing OKC's the clear one. If you are in this play-in situation, or if you can sneak into 5-6, obviously even more ideal, but you really don't want to be the team playing OKC in the playoffs as we start to get to closer to that point. Still obviously a long way to go, but they're competitive and they're in a very, very large group of teams, and they sank to the bottom for a little while, and it's nice they're kind of crawling their way out of that now, but there's still a lot of work to do. Like they could very easily go 1-3 over these next 4 games, and there's a very different feeling around this group all over again. So I think that they belong in a pretty big group, and 5-6, it's too early to say that that's out of question still.
Well, and James, this, when I tend to look at, when I'm looking at the West right now, historically, right around this time, I'll look at some teams and I go, I think they're frauds. I think this team is a fraud. I don't think this team is any good. I think they're, out kicking their coverage, punching above their weight, whatever cliche you want to use. But I've kind of got the Kings in that category as well. They control their own destiny right now. Whether they go out and make a move, capitalize off of this coaching change, you've won 5 straight. But do you believe it? Is it too soon? That's why I started this podcast by really feeling for the fans, because they've been through it all right now. But I do lump the Kings in that group of teams that potentially could be frauds right now. Like look at Phoenix. Like, you got a lot of teams. I think Phoenix is kind of plummeting at the moment. They're making changes to their starting lineup, and the Bradley Beal thing is gross. I don't think the Lakers are that good. I don't think the Warriors are that good, and they've just lost Kuminga for some time. So all these teams, barring some sort of piece that comes in, I kind of put as a fraud right now. But the Kings, have they turned it around? I don't know. They're kind of on that outlier right now. They might be a fraud. they might be able to save their season. They might be able to go out and find another piece that really helps them. There's like these 3 different scenarios for them. So they're kind of one of those teams that have just all of a sudden emerged as getting back into the conversation. Yes, but are they? Do you believe it?
They're a team that I believe was like really, really underperforming. Like, I don't think that they're a like 57 win team, but that they were underperforming pretty grotesquely. Like,
Right.
like just who they were. I mean, the 3-11 in games decided by 5 points or less to start the season. I mean, you take 2 or 3 of those games and put them in the other category, and this team is all the way up in the 4 seed or the 5 seed. Like that, they just really got in their own way for a long period of time. And I think the potential and the talent level of this team is well above where they are in the standings right now. If they can get right, it feels like they're getting right now. But again, let's see what they look like after we talked about Boston, Chicago, and Milwaukee. You come back, you get a game against Houston, and then you get a game. What's the other team they play that's not great?
I think it's
at home?
Washington.
Oh yeah, it is Washington. You get Houston, Washington, Golden State, but then they hit their road trip, which is at Denver, at New York Knicks, at Brooklyn Nets, at 76ers, at OKC, and then at Minnesota. Like you're gonna know who they are right before the trade deadline. Okay, one last thing before we get out of here. I want to ask you like a really weird. Like Luca is going to be out for like I think they're saying like 2 more weeks, right? At a minimum, maybe even 3. He's like he's already missed 15 games. If he misses 3 more, he's not eligible for All NBA. Is there a pathway here for De'Aaron Fox to make All NBA that maybe we thought 2 weeks ago, a month ago, maybe even at the beginning of the season wasn't going to be there? He's 6th in the NBA in scoring, and I think he's 4th. No, he's 3rd right now in the Western Conference in points per game.
No? I would say no. I wouldn't bet on it because at that point, this isn't an all-star you're talking about. You're dealing with the whole league. I think that's an uphill battle very steeply unless they turn their fortunes around. Like if they are able to punch back in and get back in this fight, then certainly it'll just take care of itself. But to that point, I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it though.
Brenden?
I think there's a world. You would need to have a decent amount of team success. I think for the rest of the year definitely plays a part in this. But first team last year, you still, if you want to take Luka off of it, but Giannis, SGA, Jokic, Tatum, all still right there. Second team was Brunson, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, Anthony Edwards, Kawhi Leonard. I think most of those guys
already out.
Are still in the conversation. Kawhi would be the one. Third team, Devin Booker, Steph Curry, Tyrese Halliburton, LeBron James, Domantas Sabonis ends up making that. And there's still other guys that I think absolutely still belong in that conversation. LaMelo's having a good year on a really shitty team, but his numbers are absolutely ridiculous over there.
Donovan Mitchell is going to be in the conversation.
Is having a hell of a year. Darius Garland might be in competition with De'Aaron Fox. So a lot of good players around the league that I think makes it an uphill battle, but it's possible. I think it relies on a lot of team success.
I mean, even like Lillard's playing really well all of a sudden. So I don't know. There's I just think it's an uphill battle, and
it's interesting. How many players are ineligible?
Say again?
How many players that made it last year are already ineligible?
There's a handful.
I would definitely say so. Luka, Kawhi.
Yep.
And
is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean Brunson's numbers aren't anywhere near, but Cat is going to get major consideration. Domas is going to have a tough time. Wemby will be in the conversation. Donovan Mitchell did not make it last year, right?
He did not.
No, I mean he's a shoe-in right now. His team is absolutely freaking incredible.
Yeah. Paolo and Franz have been injured enough that I guess they may be out of that conversation.
They've already missed more than 17, I believe. Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. All right. What do we got for final thoughts?
I hope everybody in Southern California is staying safe and doing all right with all the fires going on. I got some family down there, and luckily they're a little bit more inward and kind of avoiding everything. But scary sights, just with the location of all of it, obviously, rather than it being a little bit more um, just in the hills. It's very much right in people's backyards. So wishing the best for everybody there and all that's going on in SoCal. I also did see a movie that Sean recommended me, believe it or not.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Saw
Which movie?
Anora.
Oh,
Yeah, not PG. I didn't ask for a PG movie recommendation for what it's worth. And don't want those so it was good. It was good. It was hectic, definitely very chaotic, and I thought the messaging was good and the way that it was all put together. But an interesting movie. My girlfriend wasn't the biggest fan, but I thought it was good.
all right. Sean, final thoughts?
Yeah. I don't know. It's such a downer, man. Just everything going down in Southern California. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
who are impacted. It's impacting this Sacramento Kings team. Luke Locke's brother ended up his house has been hit really hard, and DeMar DeRozan lives down there, lives very close to Calabasas or in the Tarzana Calabasas area. I think everything is okay for him. Matt Barnes obviously down there having to deal with some things. JJ Redick just lost his home. Steve Kerr's high school burned down in Pacific Palisades. He's from there. So just a lot of guys that we know that are impacted, both, people that make a lot of money and the people that don't make a lot of money. And just really, really crazy to see. So hate to be that much of a downer, but just something that I've been, I don't know about you guys, I've been locked to it. Just, watching a lot of this stuff. It's just horrific. So hate to leave on a downer, but that's pretty much been consuming me, that and car shopping, as I've told you. So fortunately that stuff is behind me, and I need to go out and see a movie. I think I'm gonna check out that Bob Dylan movie. I haven't seen that yet.
I think I'm going to go see Nosferatu tonight.
Oh, I saw that. Shit. Since our last podcast, I did see that.
Okay. Enjoyed it or no?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it's if you've seen the movie before, seen various versions of it, I think I'd recommend it. I don't know that I loved it, but
Okay.
especially for how critical I am of horror movies, because most horror movies are terrible. Thought it was pretty interesting. So
Okay.
yeah.
Let's see. Final thoughts from James. Yeah, sending love to everybody down south. Absolutely horrendous. We have some friends up here that their family members lost their home. And like, look, I think we're up here. We've all kind of been through it a little bit with the fire stuff. Whether it's the Paradise stuff that we, like, isn't that far away. Like, there's been so many. I had to leave a game one night because the fire got close. That ended up going into Colfax and like wiping out a ton of homes. But again, the wife was home with our youngest at the time and like had to get home. Yeah, it's kind of weird that we've lived in a world the last maybe the last 5 or 6 years where fire danger has been so prevalent. And so just hope that it works out for a lot of people down there. I know it's just a really, really tough run, and rebuilding that area is going to be absolutely crazy. Like just billions and billions in losses. So it's not going to be an easy fix to put any of that back together after all of this. Outside of that, like, look, I think the Sacramento Kings they've piqued all of our interest again. I've seen it every day on the insiders, just how people are flocking back in to see what's going to happen next. I'm pulling for Doug to have a bit of a run here and like give himself an opportunity. He's a good dude. He cares deeply about this franchise, about this fan base, and even like it might have seemed corny out there, him taking the team up onto the roof. And shout out to our guy Kevin, who actually one of our security guys that when we check our bags, he's always there. He's the one who ended up showing Doug a bunch of pictures of the roof and the beam that sparked that decision to go up on the roof. So good for Kevin for having an idea. But even the message sounded slightly corny, but it is Doug and it's very believable. And he's right. The Sacramento Kings are the light of Sacramento. And so I think the message was not lost on a lot of fans. And, it might be corny sometimes, but I love hearing somebody say, I need to teach people how to play basketball, teach players how to play basketball, not run plays. Like to me, there's a bunch of little statements that he's made here that have been like really fun and make you think. And that's because he's thinking the whole time and he's not walking out there with some canned answer and doesn't have some sort of like message that he's trying to put forth here. So good stuff. All right. Is that it? Are we done?
Think so.
I hope so.
I hope so. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. Make sure to go to Underdog, download the app, throw in the code word Kings Beat, gamble responsibly. If you have gambling problems, 1-800-GAMBLING, go there, but be responsible and all that stuff. But thanks for tuning in. So for Fox 40, Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. I'm James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320, the Kings Beat. See you very soon.